The unrest in the nation continues to grow, along with the calls to defund the police.
Every law enforcement officer I talk to, they want accountability. But to defund them, it's completely irresponsible.
Florida Senator Rick Scott joins me, and the Republican National Convention gets a change of venue as coronavirus cases go up. I talk one-on-one with senior Trump 2020 advisor Corey Lewandowski. You'll also hear from Congressmen Michael McCaul and Devin Nunes. And what exactly does defund the police mean?
We also want to disarm law enforcement, because if I say I have a public safety force and they have guns and they have power, then that's just police by a different name.
Temple University professor Marc Lamont Hill is back to explain that and so much more right now in America This Week. Welcome to America This Week. I'm Eric Bolling, and folks, this is my first time back to the D.C. swamp since the end of March. For the last 3 months, I've hosted the show from restaurants, bars, a bowling alley, a hair salon, and even my own home in South Carolina. But I'm thrilled to be back in D.C. and get back to our new normal as much as possible. But one thing that never changed, I always have and will continue to hold the powerful accountable and ask those questions you won't hear from the mainstream media. By now, you've likely seen Seattle's Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or CHAZ, as it was first called when it was founded way back in early June, a 6-block square leftist utopia. No cops allowed inside the zone, where free-thinking young liberals walk freely while doing whatever they like: smoke weed, play music loudly, sleep with whom they choose, when they choose, and worst, where they choose. If I weren't a skeptic, I'd say sounds almost like a block party and not a military takeover nor a military junta.
We've got 4 blocks in Seattle that you just saw pictures of that is more like a block party atmosphere. It's not an armed takeover.
But since I am a skeptic and have more than an ounce of common sense, I just don't buy the mayor's assessment of CHOP. The Chazzers renamed the Chaz as the CHOP, the Capitol Hill occupied protest, because, as it turns out, being autonomous is just so darn hard. So why am I a skeptic, you might ask? Well, for one, the first thing the Chazzers did was build a wall. The very same people who accused Trump of racism for building a wall built a wall. How about that? And check out that Antifa flag flying proudly at a checkpoint on the wall. I'm also smart enough to know this little block party probably won't end well for the Chazzers or the Choppers. After all, autonomous, as in paying for your own stuff, stinks. And by the way, that's not the liberal free thinkers the way they described it in the cafes and dramatic reading rooms of Berkeley. No, folks, liberal utopia is turning out to be more trouble than they had planned for.
We've also received report that these armed people may be demanding payment from business owners in exchange for some of that protection. We've also heard that they may be demanding to see identification from people who live in the area. This is not legal.
Armed patrols? That sounds more North Korea than liberal paradise. Have I mentioned yet that there's also a self-appointed warlord? Raz Simone isn't the only armed chopper, but he claims to be the leader of the militia within the zone. Now, anyone else find it odd that the liberal utopian bloc party needs a militia, let alone a warlord? Like I said, this probably is not going to end well. Check out what happened when this business owner, who has a great misfortune to be located inside the wall, gets his store looted and set on fire.
Okay.
I can't even get the police to show up. I can't get the fire department to show up.
Okay.
I mean, I had to put the fire out myself.
And the fire department's 1 block away.
Fire department's 1 block away.
And they're still active.
And this kind of mob stuff, that doesn't work.
That's so bourgeois, defending your own stuff. Or how about the Uber driver who was waiting to pick up a ride and was told to leave at gunpoint? No, not 1, but 2 guns pointed to his head. Or this Christian preacher who was beaten and held face to the ground just for being a Christian preacher. Wait, what did you call it again, Mayor Durkin?
We've got 4 blocks in Seattle that you just saw pictures of that is more like a block party atmosphere.
Some block party, Ms. Mayor. When I said it won't end well for the Choppers, I didn't necessarily mean violent. I was thinking more along the lines of common sense solutions that could be used to end an occupation by an autonomous group disrupting life and businesses in the middle of a busy city. And the best part, it doesn't even include police. Here goes. Nothing ruins an autonomous block party like cutting off the electricity, or worse, God forbid, shutting down the internet. Can you imagine the panic if the internet was shut down? We all hope calmer heads prevail in Seattle and other occupied cities around the world. But if not, just cut off the internet and watch the little leftist crybabies go ballistic, demand stuff, blame capitalists, and like all of these silly leftist games, when they finally realize autonomy or socialism or statism doesn't work, they pack up their hookah pipes, their skateboards and tents and go home, because we know that they know that if they can't post themselves occupying on Snapchat, TikTok, or Insta, then what's the point? Go home, choppers. Take a shower. Your parents and the good people of Seattle deserve at least that much. And to the mayors, Durkins of America, the block party, just about over. This is an historic time for our country. We're in an unprecedented pandemic that has taken its toll on the economy, and protests in the wake of the police killing of George Floyd continue to grip the nation. On top of that, now there are calls to defund the police as anarchists take over parts of some cities. Tonight, we are thrilled to have our second in command and the man who led the fight against COVID-19 in the United States, Vice President Mike Pence. Thank you, sir, so much for joining our massive United States audience. Sir, let's talk about it. I read your Wall Street Journal op-ed.
Thank you, Eric. Good to be with you.
I read your Wall Street Journal op-ed. Yeah. There is no second wave coming. Sir, you point to a media panic. I think you call it. Such panic is overblown. Please explain.
Well, Eric, from the very outset of this coronavirus pandemic, thanks to President Trump's leadership early on, thanks to the sacrifices the American people have made, I mean, we slowed the spread. We flattened the curve. We saved lives. And despite the fact that, that many in the media lately are seizing on new cases in some states around the country, the truth is we've made great progress. And it's important to remember that when we started this, President Trump forged a partnership with commercial labs around the country that took us from only having done 8,000 coronavirus tests to now we do 500,000 tests a day. And much of the increase in testing in some states around, or increase in cases in some states around the country, is a reflection of the fact that we're testing more than ever before. More than 23 million tests have been performed. And in the areas that we're paying particular attention to, in areas like Texas, some areas of California and Arizona, a portion of the new cases also represents what we call outbreaks in specific counties or communities. I mean, despite the fact that the media likes to put maps up that show large portions of the country, a large number of states turned red, the truth is, as I sit here today, only 11 counties in the United States have an acceleration of new cases in those counties. We're focusing on them, sending CDC personnel, and working to put those outbreaks down. But beyond that, only about 2% of the counties in the United States have any significant increase at all. That's the real story, and the fear-mongering that's been going on in much of the national media, I think, is a great disservice to the American people, who literally in all 50 states and our territories are proving every day that we can reopen America, we can do it in a safe and responsible way. And we're going to continue to talk about the progress that we've made because of the American people every day going forward.
Mr. Vice President, Anthony Fauci, Dr. Fauci, has said that he does expect a second wave. What do you say to those who say, well, on one hand, you have Fauci saying there is going to be a second wave, and the Vice President says no? What are you basing it on?
Well, what the American people can be confident of is that we'll be ready for whatever comes if the coronavirus returns next fall or next winter. I mean, because of President Trump's strong leadership, by this September, we'll be able to test 20 to 40 million Americans a month. We've spun up a massive amount of equipment and supplies all across the country. And frankly, the American people have just learned the importance of hygiene, of common sense and social distancing. That combined with all of our new efforts through CDC give us every confidence that if we have outbreaks, we'll be able to deal with them on a specific basis. As the president says, we'll be able to put out those embers. But I think beyond talking about the second wave, which many in the media are trying to suggest we're in right now, the truth is the American people deserve to know that the current coronavirus pandemic that we've made great progress to the point now where 2 months ago we had roughly 30,000 new cases a day. Now we're averaging 20,000 new cases a day. Right. Hospitalizations for coronavirus are declining all over the country. And most important of all, without minimizing the loss of any single American life, we grieve with the more than 117,000 families that have lost loved ones. But as we sit here today, fatalities from the coronavirus are in decline all over the country. That's all evidence of the fact that every single day we're putting this coronavirus one day closer to the past, and we will be ready for whatever comes in the future.
Mr. Vice President, I want to turn to the topic, very, very important topic this week. We're talking about the executive order that the administration of the president signed this week on police reform, specifically outlining some of the things that you would like to see happen going forward. Can we have a frank conversation, just the VP and Eric Bolling here for a minute? Is there, the left is pushing back. They want more, I guess, restraints on chokeholds, et cetera, and addressing racial tensions within the police department. Is there a bipartisan or nonpartisan solution to what's going on with the police departments across the country and the African-American communities in America?
Well, I must tell you that after spending time the president and I have with law enforcement leaders and with leaders in the African-American community, both here at the White House and as I've traveled around the country to Pittsburgh and to Maryland, I believe there is common ground where we can move our nation forward. What happened to George Floyd was a disgrace. It shocked the conscience of the nation. The reality is that that the American people want to see action. I mean, they recognize that most of the men and women who put on the uniform of law enforcement are the best people in our communities. But what the president and I heard from law enforcement leaders and heard from leaders in the African American community is that there's ways we can strengthen law enforcement, give them the resources for additional training in the use of force, in de-escalation efforts, provide additional personnel on scene to better serve the public. And I think the president's executive order, I think Senator Tim Scott's legislation introduced earlier today, all represent a framework where we can move our nation forward. I mean, but the most important thing the American people should understand is that we're not going to stop there. I mean, the challenges facing our African American communities go well beyond public safety. And for more than a half a century, it's been African American families in our major cities that have suffered in the worst economic conditions, had their kids go to the worst and most dangerous schools. And this president oversaw policies that had the lowest unemployment rate ever recorded for African Americans. We created more than 4,000 opportunity zones for investments in our cities. We made funding for historically black colleges and universities permanent. And we've been a champion from the outset of this administration for giving parents the right to choose where their children go to school, whether it's public or private or a religious school. We're gonna work with law enforcement. We're gonna have law and order. We're gonna work with the African American community, with leaders in both parties in goodwill to improve public safety, but we're going to continue to work, as we have every day from the outset of this administration, to improve the prosperity, the educational opportunities, and the lives of our African Americans and all of our citizens in our cities across the country.
Sir, I want to respect your time, and we're running up against that limit. I just have one. I'd like you to get your thoughts on the Department of Justice threatening or suing former NSA Director John Bolton and Simon & Schuster for that book to prevent them from releasing that book. What are your thoughts?
Well, I would leave that to the Department of Justice, the civil action that they have taken. But look, there is a process for people that come into the administration, particularly those that work in national security and handle classified information. And the Attorney General confirmed earlier this week that that process has not been completed with regard to that book. And so we'll allow them to do their work. We'll go into the courts, but the most important thing is that the American people can be confident that this president and this administration are going to continue to stay focused as we make our way every day, one day closer to putting this coronavirus in the past, as we look for ways to heal our land, to restore law and order in our country while we even improve law enforcement, improve the quality of people's lives. That we're going to stay focused on the things that are most important to the American people in the days ahead. And I have to tell you, Eric, when you look at what's happening across the country, all 50 states across the country have begun to reopen. I was in Iowa yesterday at Sally's Restaurant in Forest City. There's tremendous enthusiasm. Those retail numbers this week, the jobs numbers last week, we're making America great again, one day at a time. And we're going to stay focused on the health, the well-being, the prosperity, and the security of the American people.
Mr. Vice President Mike Pence, thank you very much for your time. Joining me now is Florida Senator Rick Scott. Senator, thank you for joining us. You recently wrote an op-ed in the Washington Examiner on funding police. Tell us, let me just read a line that you wrote in there. You call defunding the police the single most ridiculous and irresponsible policy idea in your lifetime. Now, sir, that takes a lot because we know the Green New Deal was one of those other policy ideas, and you're calling this more irresponsible and ridiculous. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, stop and think about it. When I was governor, I always thought I had three jobs. Make sure everybody could get a job, everybody. Make sure every child had a chance to get a great education, and we wanted them to graduate with job skills. And number three was keep people safe. So if you get rid of the police, you're clearly not going to keep people safe. You're clearly not going to have more jobs, and you're not going to have a safe school. While I was governor, I passed legislation that said that every school in Florida had to have a law enforcement officer there while the school was open. So I believe in our law enforcement. Now, it's tragic. I mean, nobody I know of wants to try to defend what happened, what the police did with regard to George Floyd. That's disgusting. Every law enforcement officer I talk to, they want accountability. But to defund them, it's completely irresponsible. Accountability, we're all in. Defunding, it's crazy.
There are those on the other side who are saying that what your opinion is coming from, and I'm quoting them, from a place of privilege. What do you say to them?
Now, let's think about where I grew up, Eric. I grew up in public housing. I don't even know my dad. I'm always been my entire life. I'm very appreciative of law enforcement that they try to keep our community safe, and so I have a great working relationship with law enforcement. They want to do the right thing. You shouldn't take one bad apple and taint everybody. That's what a lot of these people want to do. There's a lot of great people out there.
All right, let's talk about another story in the news. I guess the North Carolina governor has said to the RNC and the Trump administration, the Trump campaign, that they cannot hold their convention there. Now, Florida looks like it's going to be the place to go. Tell us a little bit about the decision that went behind that. What are your thoughts about bringing the RNC convention, letting President Trump get his nomination in the state of Florida?
Everybody should come to Florida. First off, remember he's a Floridian, which makes it more appropriate. We know how to host people. We do it all across our state. My last year as governor, we had 126 million tourists. So we'll do a great job. Jacksonville will do a wonderful job. I'm glad the RNC and the Trump campaign made the decision. And I'll do everything I can to make sure it's a great convention so we can highlight the successes that the president's had. I hope he talks about job creation. I hope he talks about holding China accountable. I hope he talks about capitalism versus socialism. I hope he talks about the fact that he wants to keep people safe. If that's what comes out of the convention, I think he'll have a pretty easy election in November.
Senator, I don't know this. The venue that you're looking at, is it going to be a large venue the way they have typically always been? And are you concerned about, this wave 2? Vice President was on the show just before, says there's not going to be a wave 2 of COVID-19. Are you worried about a convention in close quarters like that with that many people?
Well, I think the expectation is everybody's got to, figure out how to keep themselves safe. I know every venue, every employer's thinking, how do they keep their employees and their customers safe? So, look, the coronavirus is still an issue. It's still an issue in every state in this country. And I know everybody's focused on it in Florida. I hope everybody continues to social distance, continue to wear masks. But I think we're going to have a great convention, and I think it's going to highlight the success that Donald Trump has had for his first 4 years.
Okay, and finally, you have about a minute and a half or so, sir. You're hot on the trail of China. We want to hold China accountable. I'll say it again. China lied, people died. What do you know?
Well, we've got to hold them accountable. Let's remember, it's communist China. The government is a communist government. It's a government that's doing this. She is not a duly elected president. He's the Secretary General of the Communist Party. They steal our jobs, steal our technology. They lied to us about the pandemic. They're taking away the rights of Hong Kong citizens, trying to do the same thing with Taiwan. We have got to wake up, and we've got to hold them accountable. The biggest thing we can all do: buy American products. Don't buy anything made in communist China. That's the best way to hold them accountable, and we have to hold them accountable.
What about those? I'll raise my hand, who think China should actually pay. Now, they'll never pay for loss of life, but they can certainly somehow start to pay for some of the money the trillions of dollars we've had to spend just keeping our economy afloat. Trillions, yeah. What about holding them accountable in the form of payments?
They should, Eric, they should pay. It's difficult to do. So if you want to hold them accountable right now, don't buy anything made in communist China. If you want to do the best thing, buy American products.
Senator, that's easy.
Absolutely.
That one's easy. That one's easy. The tough one is holding them and saying, you owe us a check, or we're going to put a fee on all our Chinese imports into this country. Your thoughts? Half a minute or so.
Yeah. Look, we need to do all of the above. We need to hold them accountable. But the biggest thing we can do is do exactly what you said. Buy American products. Don't buy Chinese products. It's communist China. Don't forget, they've decided to become our adversary.
I don't know. I kind of like the idea of that. I always like buying America. I get that. But also, I'm a free marketeer here. It's unusual for me to suggest something like this, but there's nothing wrong with slapping some sort of import fee on any Chinese product that comes over here. And if they got a problem with it, they can try and find another customer as willing with open arms as the United States of America has been to them. Senator Rick Scott, we appreciate your time of Florida, and good luck with the convention. Hope to have you on right around convention time again.
All right. Nice seeing you again.
You too, sir. Ahead on America This Week, he's the senior advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign. Corey Lewandowski looks at the president's latest polls. And still to come, calls to defund the police are growing, and now some cities are taking action. I sit down with Temple University professor Marc Lamont to discuss the potential impacts.
America, one nation, from Florida to St. Louis to Seattle. America This Week, America's fastest growing political show, delivers facts, not falsehoods.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I appreciate the opportunity to clear some of it up.
Hard-edged opinions.
We can no longer rely on China to be the primary producer of so many critical products that we need at a time of crisis.
Tough topic debates.
Has the mainstream media vetted Joe Biden the way they vetted others on the right?
I just believe that all women have the right to speak their truth, and that those truths should also be investigated. The end, regardless of what political party they are a part of.
America This Week reveals the topics and issues that pulse throughout America. Fighting COVID-19.
We're working with every single state to be able to detect outbreaks before they spread into the community.
And the path forward.
Getting back to some degree of normality, that will come. We will get over this.
America This Week investigates chaos at the southern border.
Go, 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 go.
1 the poisoning of America.
It's in the soils, it's in the water, and it's in our blood.
Toxic chemicals linked to multiple cancers found in towns across America.
We were poisoned, and we are still poisoned.
Almost every day, there is a new community that is finding out that their water is contaminated.
America This Week relentlessly seeks the truth on your behalf.
I'm Eric Bolling. Join me for a fascinating look at America This Week.
We should know what voters as well as
Brian, would you
non-voters know
publish
about the
that?
president.
Are you really willing to stand by such a junk science poll?
That was CNN's Brian Stelter and Trump 2020 legal advisor Jenna Ellis this week, getting very heated over CNN's recent poll. That put the president 14 points behind Biden. Joining me now, my good friend and senior advisor for Trump's 2020 campaign, also 2016, the man, Corey Lewandowski. Corey, talk to us a little bit about that poll. I know the campaign wants to sue CNN. I'm not sure they're going to do it, but where are these poll numbers coming from, these national polls? Have they ever been right, and why are they pushing them on TV?
Well, Eric, the narrative is very clear. If we look at the national polling data, that includes states like California and New York, and includes the states like South Dakota and North Dakota. And if we think that we're going to have competitive elections in any of those 4 states, we're only kidding ourselves. And so when we should be looking at polling data in the battleground states. You're thinking Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, Florida, North Carolina. Those are the states that matter. I don't want to say that the other states don't matter, but the outcome of this election is going to be determined in 9 or 10 battleground states. And so national polls really have no impact. And all we have to do is go back and look 4 years ago when they told us Donald Trump was going to lose to Hillary Clinton right up until Election Day. And, you know, Eric, I went back and looked at this, and it's kind of amazing to me. Way back when George H.W. Bush was running against Michael Dukakis, the New York Times had a phony poll out almost exactly this time of the year in 1988. And it said that George H.W. Bush was going to lose to Michael Dukakis 53-38. We now know there's never been a President Dukakis, and so that's how bad some of these national polls really are.
I remember in 2015 going into 2016, they used to tell people, stop looking at the polls. They don't, man. National polls are irrelevant. Look at the people, and there was massive enthusiasm on the part of your candidate, Donald Trump. But so you're talking, Corey, right now you're talking to those battleground states that you pointed out, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Florida, Ohio. That's where we broadcast to all those states. Those are all tight races. Those are and again, people need to understand the elections, you know, the Democrat, no matter who or she is going to win New York and Illinois and California. Those 5 or 6 battleground states make or break an election. How are you guys doing in those states?
Well, look, we've got work to do. Don't kid yourself, Eric. Look, remember, we won Michigan by 10,704 votes. And on the night of election eve, going into election morning, Donald Trump was rallying in Michigan with 12,000 people. So these rallies make a difference. What we see going into this weekend with the president going to Oklahoma is we've got 1.2 million people who've requested tickets. To put that in perspective, that's the population of the entire state of New Hampshire, where I'm sitting right now.
Let me just very quickly, only about a minute or so, Corey. Race is all over the news. Is race going to be a 2020 campaign issue? Who wins? Will it depend on who does well with race?
Well, of course, look, Donald Trump got 8% of the African-American vote in 2016. We're going to do better than that. The last time a GOP candidate broke the 10% mark was when Bob Dole in 1996 got 12% of the African-American vote. So race is always a factor, but I believe the Democrats have taken advantage of the black community for 30 years, and the president's going to show them that on Election Day.
Corey, we're going to leave it there. Again, we have to point out that Joe Biden was part of the group in 1994, the Clinton group that brought the crime bill, the 94 crime bill. Biden supported it, aggressively supported it. Again, more African Americans and minorities really incarcerated unduly. In other words, if you take the population versus incarcerations, they point right to that crime bill. I don't know how, if race is going to be an issue, that African Americans and minorities generally can't point their finger at Joe Biden. Corey, I ran out of time. I apologize to my good friend, Corey Lewandowski. Texas Congressman Michael McCaul is the lead Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, the committee Republicans just released a report on the failures of China during the pandemic Tell us about it. What's the most provocative thing you released in that report?
Well, just the consistent cover-up by the Chinese Communist Party, dating back to mid-November through December, detaining 8 doctors, charging them, silencing them. They're trying to tell the truth about the fact they had a SARS-like virus that was highly contagious. Then the Chinese Communist Party went into the laboratories, destroyed lab samples. Then you go to mid-January when the human-to-human transmission is being discussed. The CCP has an internal memo documenting that it's happening, yet they lie to the WHO about the fact they have a highly contagious virus in China. Then they have the Lunar Festival, Spring Festival, 5 million people traveling out of Wuhan throughout China, then internationally, and then it goes from an epidemic to a global pandemic. And the thing that to me is most disturbing is that Director General Tedros knew about all this all along. In fact, Taiwan warned him about it. His own WHO expert in Wuhan warned him about the fact it was human to human, yet he disregarded that evidence and failed in his most important mission, and that is to alert the world to a global pandemic. And now we've seen what destruction has become of that failure.
It's amazing, Congressman. We say, I've said China lied, people died, and people got upset about that. But if that's the case, then they did. They lied. They slow-walked the release of this information, and people were left holding the bag and contracting this virus when they didn't need to. The WHO, I'm concerned about this, Tedros. So you're actually having Tedros complicit with the Chinese, knowing that this virus could be spread as a pandemic, and they were quiet on it. That sounds pretty damning for the WHO, too.
When the WHO's own expert in Wuhan warns the Director General Tedros that it is human to human, and he disregards that and decides, they meet actually, and they convene in Geneva, and Tedros decides not to issue a public health emergency international alert at that point in time. And you know what's sad is that by all accounts, 95% of this could have been contained in China had he done that at that time. But as time passed on, we know he didn't alert the world until 18 countries had been impacted by the virus. By that time, it was way too late.
I want to bring you back. We're running out of time. I want to bring you back and talk about possible restitution with China. What do we do with them? But before we do that, there's some rumors that during that period that China slow-walked this release of this information, they were hoarding PPE. Did you find any truth to that?
Yeah, the Department of Homeland Security issued a report. China knew what was going on, the Chinese Communist Party. They began to hoard the PPE, that's personal protective equipment, and then they hoarded it and then price gouged, essentially, Europe with this equipment. And it's absolutely criminal what they did to the world. And now this race to the vaccine, we have evidence that they are now trying to hack our scientists. They're trying to race to the vaccine so they can steal that so that they can claim that they created the vaccine that will save the world from the very virus that they created.
I just have 10 seconds, sir. Any indication that this Chinese virus was started in the lab? We understand bat to human, but was it actually started in the lab, or was this an accident?
We can't discount the lab. I think if it was the lab, it was accidental. Remember in 2004, SARS, 2 of the researchers came out contaminated with it. We had 2 State Department cables in 2018 raising safety issues about the standards at that lab. They were researching coronaviruses from bats, how they transmit to humans, exactly what COVID-19 is.
We're going to leave right there. Congressman Mike McCaul, appreciate your time.
Thanks, Eric.
We're pleased to welcome back Congressman Devin Nunes to the show. Congressman, let's discuss the executive order President Trump signed this week. Also, the Senate Republicans put out their version of police reform. Tell us what you know, what you're going to expect on your desk.
Well, look, if the Senate can come to an agreement and pass something that mirrors what the president is doing, the House should be able to pass it easily. I think all of us are very frustrated across the country. We're tired of seeing African Americans in this country treated poorly. The danger is here, though, is that we shouldn't be running into this defund the police madness. The idea that we would go from a few bad apples to then defunding the police department, which is one of the most basic principles in this country of us, expecting our government to provide safety for our citizens. I'm just shocked, quite frankly, Eric. I can't believe the Democrats are embracing this policy.
Give us a sense, Congressman, give us a sense of the most important piece in both the executive order and the legislation that the Senate Republicans put together for you. What do you think is the one thing that needs to stand out?
Well, look, I think the easy thing right off the bat is just not if they're in handcuffs, no chokeholds. I think it makes common sense. I spoke to California sheriffs the other night, Sheriff's Association. They were very clear that, look, that most, police departments have already outlawed that. So I think it's something that people can live with. The main thing we'll have to do is, as this bill moves through the process, we need to make sure that we're reaching out to all the law enforcement agencies to ensure that this is not going to be something that's going to make the country less safe, to either make our police officers less safe or our citizenry less safe.
On the left, there are people, and I only have about a minute or so, Congressman. On the left, people are looking for some of this legislation to include some sort of national registry for cops who get in trouble for brutality. In other words, if you do something wrong, you're one of the very, very small minority bad cops in a city, you do something wrong, they put you on a registry. Your thought of that?
Well, look, it strikes me as socialist communism. I mean, the days of the lists are things that have their background and their invention in socialist Marxist policies, things that happened in the old Soviet Union and China today, and likely still in many dictatorships around the world. Creation of lists is never a good idea.
All right, Mr. Devin Nunes, Congressman Devin Nunes from California, we really appreciate your time. We'll get you back on. As you know, boy, this issue is not going away. This topic is all over the place and will continue going forward. Devin Nunes, thank you so much.
Thanks, Eric.
Coming up next on America This Week, host of BET News and Temple University professor Marc Lamont Hill returns. We discuss the growing cries to defund the police.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America. United we stand. Ready to help, ready to serve. It takes everyone with steady nerves. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, American strong. City by city, state by state, town by town, stand American great. Everyone stands American strong. When strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand America. United we stand. We stand America. United we stand.
Protesters against police brutality burned a Wendy's to the ground this week. That Wendy's was the site where Rayshard Brooks was shot and killed by police. Rayshard was found asleep and possibly intoxicated at the drive-thru. He was killed after body cam video showed him grab an officer's taser. I'd like to welcome back Temple University professor and host of BET News, good friend of mine, Marc Lamont Hill. Marc, last week you wanted to talk about defending police. I want to talk about that just for a moment or so. I look at it, Rayshard Brooks should not be dead. But then I take it one step further, and I think both the officer and Rayshard Brooks are at fault on that. The officer could have maybe let this thing go or let someone run away with his taser, not kill him. But Rayshard Brooks, when are we going to teach people of all colors, stop resisting arrest? It doesn't end well.
Well, you raised a couple of points here. This Rayshard Brooks situation is exactly why I want to defund the police, because this whole situation only happens because law enforcement are being called to a scene for something that didn't really need escalation. It didn't really need police intervention. Imagine if this guy had been able to get home, been able to walk home. We called an Uber for him. He was able to get help. These are the types of things that would have stopped this from happening. And so if we could minimize the role, the level of police interaction, things like this don't happen.
Marc, I agree with you. I agree with you. That would have been wonderful. But what are you going to do? Send a social worker out to on all these situations? I mean, think about how some of these have escalated. They look innocent. You send a social worker out, there are going to be a lot of dead social workers.
Now, if you look at this Rayshard Brooks case, for example, it didn't look like he was offering any resistance. If they talked to him for 26 minutes peacefully, it was only when they attempted to arrest him that the problem came. Now, again, Rayshard Brooks could have made some different choices. I'm not saying he didn't make some bad choices here. He absolutely did. But if we had a different mechanism, if we had a public safety force which wasn't designed to police, but to actually help folk, he would have never been in that situation in the first place.
Here's your idea. Here's your idea. Public safety force, you call it. When you say force, I assume they have authority. Do they have weapons?
No. So the thing that we want to do is defund. We want to also disarm. Excuse me. We also want to disarm law enforcement, because if I say I have a public safety force and they have guns and they have power, then that's just police by a different name. No, I want an actual different mechanism here to help and support folk and have a very limited police force and ultimately work to a world where we don't have any.
So explain this public safety force. I mean, what are they allowed to do?
Well, I think you're focused on the word force a bit. I was using force somewhat loosely.
Call it whatever you want.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So the idea here is that there are a limited number of people who cause harm to a community that we have to be mindful of. No matter how much I want to abolish police, I can't ignore that there are rapists, there are child molesters, there are serial killers, there are people who need to be restrained from the community. And I do think that a limited force is necessary for that. And I do use force very deliberately in that case. But more broadly, I think we need people to ensure the public safety so that when someone, for example, falls asleep on a street corner or someone has a drug overdose, I don't need a gun-carrying police officer there.
Let me. Okay, I'm playing devil's advocate here. We're part of the state or the municipality, the city of XYZ city. Someone calls and said domestic dispute at 12 Main Street. Who do we send? Do we send a cop or your group?
So that's actually a really good example, because in Chicago, we have violence interrupters, right, who are not armed. They're not part of the police force. And they show up to do this very thing, to resolve disputes, to get people home. Because the problem is 9 times out of 10, when there's a domestic dispute, particularly when a man is accused of violence against women, oftentimes the police come, they tell the guy to leave, and then the guy comes back the next night.
But a lot of times a cop gets shot in those situations, right? So a firearm is produced by some people at the location. Let me give you another example, Marc. Guys selling Lucy's, a single cigarette on the street in New York. Who comes? A cop or one of your guys?
So I think, again, another good question. For me, we have to change part of abolition is changing our social imagination so that every time there's a dispute, we don't want to call somebody on you. Eric, if you and I went out for a night and I started drinking too much, you're drinking water, I'm drinking scotch all night, and I get so drunk I can't drive. You're not calling the cops on me. You're going to say, Marc, give me your keys, or Marc, I'll call you an Uber. There's a way that we can relate to one another that we don't have to call somebody on one another. Alton Sterling was killed in Louisiana selling CDs in 2016. He's not a threat to anybody, not even the music industry, selling CDs in 2016. Right?
And that's my point, Marc. My point was actually making your point, because I don't think Eric Gardner should have died for selling single cigarettes. And I'm not sure someone should die, Michael Brown should die, because he's, stealing cigars from a convenience store in Ferguson. Yeah. And I don't think in Minneapolis someone should die for trying to pass a fake $20 bill. I agree with you. There's got to be somewhere in between. Again, this gets such a gray area. It's so not so black and white. Marc, we ran out of time again. We'll bring you back again. Love having these conversations with you. Appreciate your time, Marc. Lamont Hill. There's definitely no shortage of things to discuss this week. Coming up next, Amisha Cross and Dr. Sebastian Gorka go head-to-head on all the hot issues of the week. And speaking of hot issues, the calls haven't stopped pouring in. 888-601-0032, toll free. You can tell me exactly what you're thinking about anything. And because we hear you, I'll make sure they hear you too.
If they arrest that police officer after being smacked in the face and hit with his own taser because somebody resisted arrest and then ran away with a weapon, then all of the Atlanta police need to all resign.
Yeah, enjoy your show. Want to ask, why don't they move your show to come on right after the national news so we can get one side of the prejudice news and then get the truth from you?
You know what? I think you have a point there. I'll be sure to bring that up with the boss. I have a call with him right after the show. Here's that number again, 888-601-0032, totally free. Also, check out ericbolling.com, also free. And follow me on Twitter at Eric Bolling. Right now, it's more important than ever for your voice to be heard, and we'll make sure they hear you.
America, one nation, from Florida to St. Louis to Seattle. America This Week, America's fastest growing political show, delivers facts, not falsehoods.
Well, there's a lot of misinformation out there, and I appreciate the opportunity to clear some of it up.
Hard-edged opinions.
We can no longer rely on China to be the primary producer of so many critical products that we need at a time of crisis.
Tough topic debates.
Has the mainstream media vetted Joe Biden the way they vetted others on the right?
I just believe that all women have the right to speak their truth and that those truths should also be investigated. The end, regardless of what political party they are a part of.
America This Week reveals the topics and issues that pulse throughout America. Fighting COVID-19.
We're working with every single state to be able to detect outbreaks before they spread into the community.
And the path forward.
Getting back to some degree of normality, that will come. We will get over this.
America This Week investigates chaos at the southern border.
Go, 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 go.
The poisoning of America.
It's in the soils, it's in the water, and it's in our blood.
Toxic chemicals linked to multiple cancers found in towns across America.
We were poisoned, and we are still poisoned.
Almost every day, there is a new community that is finding out that their water is contaminated.
America This Week relentlessly seeks the truth on your behalf.
I'm Eric Bolling. Join me for a fascinating look at America This Week.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America. United we stand.
The calls to defund the police and the ongoing protests have continued to divide America. Now we get a chance to hear from both sides of the aisle with issues from political commentator Amisha Cross and former Deputy Assistant to President Trump, host of America First on Salem Radio, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Amisha, I got to start with you. You know, Rayshard Brooks, in Atlanta, everyone's focused on that right now. It's an important situation because there are two things at play here. Number one, the use of force. We have to talk about the use of force, whether or not deadly force should have been used there. And the other one I think we can all agree on is resisting arrest. Where do those two intersect? Tell us what you think.
Absolutely. I think that these are two very pertinent questions. When it comes to use of force, there is a definite argument for, and one that I stand behind, that the use of force in this case was not something that should have been done. The thing about Georgia is that Georgia's use of force laws are extremely broad, which makes a case like this particularly difficult. Full disclosure, my partner is with the ACLU of Georgia, and this is one of the things that they've been pushing to change for years because they've seen how it impacts communities of color specifically. Do I believe that there shouldn't have been an altercation between Rayshard Brooks and the police? Absolutely. But I also feel as though there are de-escalation tactics. There are ways in which this did not have to result in a young man dying.
Yeah, and Sebastian, let me take this. And there's no one who defends cops more than me. We do it every single show. We talk about fallen officers, all in on defending police. But here's my situation. I look at that. I watched the, whatever it was, 27 or 30 minutes of that videotape that probably most people haven't seen. For me, there was an opportunity for a police officer to take someone who was drunk and say, or allegedly drunk, and say, look, walk home, don't get behind the car. I mean, is there no, are we now drawing such fine black and white lines, not to use that term that way, but black and white lines of, if someone does this, then I can shoot, I can use this level of force. Is community policing out the window now in America?
That's a great question when you have the Democrat Party literally voting in certain places to dismantle the local police, which of course would create anarchy and which would hurt minorities the most. Look, there's actually 90 minutes of video available from the body cams. And if you watch the full 90 minutes, something went wrong here. You've got a guy who's got over 1.3 blood alcohol level. That's illegal. You can't be in a car, in control of a car with that much alcohol in your blood system. Then the arrest takes half an hour. What are we talking about here? Why is an arrest taking that long to actually effect? And then lastly, and let's just be very clear about this, he hit the police officer, and then he grabbed the officer's taser. At that point, you've got to stop that man, because if he tases that police officer and takes away his weapon...
You, Sebastian, allow me to just ask you, and I'm going to throw this to Amisha in a second, but here's the thing. You know, if we talk about why was he in a situation that he was on the ground fighting back, and it was because the police officers wanted to arrest him. Now, I'm not saying you should let drunk drivers go, get back behind the wheel and go. I'm simply saying, is there some sort of common sense solution to this? Listen, Mr. Brooks, go home, go to your sister's house, sleep this off, leave your car here, or pick the keys up at the police station tomorrow. I just think but because of what's going on, we're becoming so angry at each other that they devolve into these situations.
When somebody's got control of a vehicle and they are way over the drunk driving limit, they've committed a crime, it's easy to do a Sunday quarterback, Monday quarterback kind of thing here. But Eric, I'll just say one thing. You're not in the arena. I'm not in the arena. It's video footage. Let the system judge whether it's the officer who killed George Floyd or whether it's this case. We're not going to judge people based on video cameras.
So,
I'm sorry.
Let me bring this to Amisha, and you know, I got to take the other side of this also and just throw this at you, Amisha. But why are we resisting? Why are we not teaching people of all colors, white, black, brown, stop resisting arrest? If you're getting arrested, go to the police station and work it out after that, because too many people are dying after the resisting arrest part of it.
Resisting arrest has been used time and time again when people, quote unquote, were not resisting arrest. This is not one of those cases. This is one of the rare times where I'm going to pull on something that Sebastian Gorka actually said. We know that the blood alcohol level in this case was well over the limit. This man was stone cold wasted. When you have reached that point, there are a lot of irrational behaviors that you have that you would not have when you were in that same situation. We also know that this process took over 30 minutes. To say why, for the first 25 minutes, the officers were talking to him. They were de-escalating. They were having a regular conversation. They knew where his grandma lived. They knew about his aunt around the corner. There was not an instigation of violence at that point. Something happened to where they threw all of their training out of the door. And I know, as someone whose father is an officer, that when you're dealing with someone who is inebriated, when you're dealing with someone who is an opioid addict, when you're dealing with someone who is under the influence, there are procedures in place to not only protect you as an officer, but also that individual. What I saw in that video was that those things were not used. We also know that the officer in question who committed that violent act was one who had multiple things against him, because he had been cited by the police as well as the community for multiple occasions of him not only using excessive force, but being inappropriate with those he was trying to detain.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Obviously, a topic we're going to continue to stay on. Again, thank you very much, Amisha Cross and Sebastian Gorka. Every week, we honor first responders who died in the line of duty protecting our great country. Sergeant Damon Gutzwiller with the Santa Cruz County Sheriff's Office in California was shot and killed in an ambush on June 6th. Another deputy and a highway patrol officer were also injured but survived. Sergeant Gutzwiller was with the Sheriff's Office for 14 years and leaves behind his pregnant wife and young child. Border Agent Johan Morden was found dead last week while on a foot patrol in a remote desert trail in New Mexico. Agent Morden had been with the Border Patrol for 11 months and was just 26 years old. Rest in peace, officers.
United we stand, we never fall. This perilous fight, it takes one and all. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America. United we stand. Ready to help, ready to serve. It takes everyone with steady nerves. Everyone stands, American strong. Strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand, America. United we stand. We stand, America strong. City by city, state by state, town by town, stand American great. Everyone stands American strong. When strength by one equals strength by all. American values, American pride. Your neighbor needs you, each person, each time. We stand America. United we stand. We stand America. United we stand.
Well, that's a wrap from the D.C. Swamp. Sure does feel good to say that again. Remember, set your DVR and record us to make sure you never miss a moment of America This Week. Go to Facebook.com/America Bowling to find out when we air in your city. There's a complete list right at the top of the page. Thanks for watching us, folks. Tonight, we want to leave you with some inspiration. They're the next generation who will protect and serve our country at all costs. To the 2020 graduates from West Point, we salute you. Here's to your next chapter of your lives. Be proud. We sure are of you.
Class of 2020, dismissed! Class of 2020, dismissed!